Hello and welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Sarah, and I'm happy to be with you a second time this week, bringing you my second author view. Author view? Maybe I'll just make that my new mashup. Bring you a second author interview for this week here in the middle of September. Hope you've had a good week. It's Friday, so I hope you've got something wonderful planned for the weekend, whether that's doing absolutely nothing, whether that's being incredibly productive, whatever you need to make your weekend perfect. I hope you have that planned. As we get started, I do want to remind you, as I always do, to please like, follow, and subscribe on whatever platform you're either listening to or watching this episode on. That really does help to get the podcast out to more readers, such as yourselves, helps that algorithm. You can also help in a monetary fashion by going to gsmcpodcast.net. There you can leave a tip, call it a donation, call it whatever you would like, but it helps not only this podcast, but the network as a whole. And that support is always greatly appreciated. This podcast and the network would not exist without the support of all of our followers and everything that you have done to support us throughout the years. So thank you, as always, for everything that you have done. But again, if you would like to contribute to the network in a monetary fashion, you can do so by going to gsmcpodcast.net. And thank you in advance if that's something that it is in you to do. So how is your day so far? Mine was actually really calm. It's been a very crazy, busy week, not getting much sleep and doing a lot and having a very, very busy schedule. And then the dogs have been waking me up at random times in the night. So I've been very tired. But today, actually, I got some rest. It was not a crazy busy day in terms of my teaching schedule. So I am very grateful that I had that today. And I hope that you are having something similar. This weekend, we're going to spend time with friends that we haven't seen in about a year. They are here visiting from London, so we are excited to see them and spend time with them. I saw them briefly on Wednesday, but hubby hasn't seen them yet, and so we're going to go. They love to play the card game Phase 10, if you know it, and took me 3 years to ever win a game. No, 2 years? Took me more than a year, at least 2, possibly 3 years to win a game. And I think I've won 2 out of all the games we've ever played. So we'll see how tomorrow goes. Maybe I'll win, maybe I won't. I'll let you know. At any rate, we are here to talk about a book. This week we are talking historical fiction. I'm speaking with author Joan Fernandez about her book, Saving Vincent. As I said, this is historical fiction. Let me give you the description of the book. In the tradition of the Paris bookseller and her hidden genius, the story of a real woman overshadowed in history by the giant talent she saved, Vincent van Gogh. How did a failed belligerent Dutch painter become one of the greatest artists of our time? In 1891, timid Jo van Gogh Bonger lives safely in the background of her art dealer husband Theo's passionate work to sell unknown artists, especially his ill-fated dead brother Vincent. When Theo dies unexpectedly, Jo's brief happiness is shattered. Her inheritance, hundreds of unsold paintings by Vincent, is worthless. Pressured to move to her parents' home, Jo defies tradition, opening a boarding house to raise her infant son alone, and choosing to promote Vincent's art herself. But her ingenuity and persistence draw the powerful opposition of a Parisian art dealer who vows to stop her once and for all, and so sink Vincent into obscurity. Saving Vincent reveals there was more than one genius in the Van Gogh family. So this was something that I didn't know about Joan. I didn't know, but I knew that Vincent van Gogh's work was not well received during his lifetime. I knew it only became famous and well known after his death. I had no idea about Joan. I didn't really know anything about her. I barely knew that Vincent had a brother. Actually, he had multiple siblings. Never really thought about that. Famous artists like this sometimes get built up in our minds, and we forget that they were humans as well, who had families and lives. And we, especially when we don't know much about someone who is often portrayed as mentally unstable, a genius but mentally unstable. That's the thing. That's what we know often about Vincent van Gogh. So I was really excited to read this book and get to know Jo's story because she really is overshadowed, overlooked, and we would not know Vincent van Gogh without her dedication, without her persistence, without her work to get his work into the world. So we're going to go ahead and let Joan talk about this labor of love that she created to get Jo's story into the world. Again, the book is Saving Vincent. The author is Joan Fernandez. Hi, Joan. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Sarah. I'm delighted to be here.
I am happy to have you here. I'm excited to talk about Saving Vincent. But before we get to the book, if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit about yourself so my listeners can get to know you a bit.
That's wonderful. Well, I think I have something in common with a lot of your listeners in that I am a book lover. I'm one of those kids, that was always reading and their
Mm.
parents are prodding me to go outdoors. So I just take the book with me.
Yes.
And I was an English major in college, so I pursued that love for writing and literature in college, and I always said that I would write a book. But life happens as life
Mhm.
does. And so I did go into a career in marketing, which is related to communications. And so that lasted a good 30 years. But it wasn't until now, it's about 9 years ago, that the idea occurred to me, oh my gosh, I never wrote a book.
Mm.
That is when I made the shift to be able to write what eventually became Saving Vincent. So in the course of that time, I had a couple of kids, and now they have kids,
Mm.
and that is super fun. I have six a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old in Arizona. So my husband and I have a little home in Sedona, but then we also have a grandkids who are 2 years and 4 months in the
Oh,
Midwest. So we also have a place in St. Louis. So we kind of hop back and forth. And the good thing about writing is you just take it with you, right?
yeah.
Have MacBook will travel type of a thing.
Yes.
And so that's really we both my husband and I are retired now, although I'm doing the full-time authoring thing. And so that gives us a lot of time to continue traveling. We've done a lot. Always loved that. And Sarah, I have the advantage of a husband who cooks.
Nice.
Not only does he cook, but he's like a foodie cook. So I enjoy many lovely meals. So
Very
those are
nice.
my favorite things to share with people.
I love it. I also have a husband who cooks and who likes to he likes to go chop champion. So, whatever we have in the kitchen, he'll figure something out.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. We've gotten some interesting combinations, but he always pulls it off.
That's all right. And the correct answer is always, well, thank you, because
Right,
it's a
right.
good thing.
Hey, look, I didn't have to make this.
Exactly.
Yes. So talk about Saving Vincent. Give an overview of the book.
Sure. Well, Saving Vincent is the based on the true story of Jo van Gogh. So she was married to Theo van Gogh, Vincent's brother, and so is Vincent's sister-in-law. And I came across her story, Sarah, in 2016. I was on a girlfriend trip to Amsterdam, and we went to the Van Gogh Museum. And after touring that museum, with one of those audio tours, so you've got the curator's voice in your head,
Hmm.
I felt such an emotional connection to Vincent that it was at the end of that tour that I saw this little notation about Jo that gave her credit. Now, in 2016, they didn't have the type of exhibits that they have today about Jo. So I remember reading that notation right in the thick of just so feeling this sort of connection and heartache for Vincent and thinking, oh my gosh, like, why don't we know about you? Because in that notation, it referred to the fact that she had inherited all of Vincent's work and she was the one that ultimately developed him into a global icon.
Right.
And so that was a seed that got planted. And so that is the story of Saving Vincent. It begins, this is not a spoiler because it's in the first chapter. It
Right.
begins when Theo, her husband, dies. He's died just 6 months after Vincent. And she inherits all this artwork, and it's worthless,
Yeah.
which is crazy, right? Crazy considering it's a multi-billion-dollar collection today.
Yeah.
But she then decides to take it upon herself for a number of reasons to keep the paintings and then begin to see if she can't create some awareness and acceptance for Vincent's artwork, since Theo had only been able to sell one painting. So the book covers the obstacles she faced, how she grew as an individual from sort of this timid woman to one who could lead this incredible worldwide effort. And the book ends with probably the stroke of genius that truly put Vincent on the map, and that was with a major exhibition in which he was then equated with big names like Cézanne or Paul Gauguin and so forth.
Yeah.
So this is really a story it's a true story about a young woman who today I think needs to be acknowledged for her role in Vincent's fame.
Right, because without her, I don't think any of us know Vincent van Gogh, because he really was not well known or popular in his lifetime. Um,
That's true. And he was really discredited and disregarded because he was considered, he had a disturbed mind. And so he
yeah.
was basically written off. There's one story about he gave a painting in Arles, which is in the south of France, to someone who was friendly to him. And the painting was used in the guy's chicken coop as
I've
part of a
heard that
wall.
story.
Can you
Yes.
imagine?
Like those stories that you hear that you never know if they're true, or you find some priceless
Right.
painting at a garage sale or something.
Exactly.
Yeah, you walk into a chicken coop and there's a Van Gogh.
And
Maybe
you
those
say,
chickens laid
I will buy the whole chicken coop right now.
right. Maybe those chickens laid really impressive eggs.
I think so.
I think so. Would love if the eggs actually came out looking like Vincent van Gogh paintings. That would be awesome. I feel like there's a children's book in there somewhere. I don't know if I'm the person to write it, but I just there's something in there percolating around in my brain. But we're going to go ahead and take our first break of this episode. When we come back, we'll be talking more about Jo as the main character of this novel. What about her is going to potentially resonate with you as readers? You're tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with author Joan Fernandez. This is your second and final reminder of this episode that if you would like to help in a monetary fashion, you can do so by going to gsmcpodcast.net. As I have said before, will say again, that helps not only this podcast, but the network as a whole. You see the link in the video next to me right now, but you're also going to see it scrolling along the bottom throughout the episode in case you need a reminder, in case you are so moved to go to gsmcpodcast.net and leave a tip or a donation, and just help support this podcast in another way. Everything you do supports this podcast and is greatly appreciated. Before the break, we were talking about Jo, the protagonist, the main character, the focus of Saving Vincent, and how Vincent had only sold, before Jo, Vincent only one of Vincent's paintings had been sold in his lifetime, and that was in a chicken coop. Not sold in a chicken coop, but placed in a chicken coop. Let's go ahead and return to the conversation with Joan. Talk a little bit more about Jo and what about her is going to resonate with readers.
I think that a few things that was really important to me is when I did my research about her, I have in my dedication that this is a feminist point of view. And what I mean by that is I felt as though there wasn't attention given to the fact that, number one, she was a single parent. Like,
Mm-hmm.
she had this toddler running around. And those of us who have had toddlers recently know how intense that is.
Yeah.
Secondly, after she inherited all of those paintings, she became a small business owner. She ran a boarding house with all the demands that that would take, and that was exhausting. And then third, so she's then writing letters and beginning to promote Vincent after hours, but she's also doing it now in an environment that's hostile to her because women were not a part of the art dealing community at that time, and she was really maligned until Vincent's paintings began to sell. And then that became a reason for people to start to pay more attention to her. And so I felt as though um, this part of her challenges needed to be a part of her story, in addition to the real brilliance that she had when it came to marketing. And we can talk a little bit more about that in a minute, because they wouldn't have used that words, but
Right.
she had this intuitive sense of how to break through this erroneous assumptions that were around Vincent that really made him anonymous and not regarded.
Mm-hmm. And she's doing all of this. The not only is there no internet, I mean, there's no phones. There are no, she's doing everything by handwriting with probably a terrible pen.
Yeah. Or if she's like me, terrible penmanship, but yeah.
Not that she would have known any difference, but like just thinking about all the extra steps and the waiting that would have been in that process, is pretty impressive. When we first meet her, we very quickly get the understanding that she is a woman of her time. She's expected to move back to her father's house when her husband died, and nobody is taking her seriously. So for you, as you were researching, did you see a really clear turning point for her in her story, or did you kind of have to maybe craft that a little bit for the story that you were telling?
Well, I did want to create that moment of opportunity in that first chapter with Theo's death, which is sort of the inciting incident where in anyone's, I think in any of our lives, when a close person passes away, you've turned the page and your life feels different. And so um, she, in that moment, my research had showed the type of marriage that she and Theo had had, which was kind of unusual for their times. And that Theo really treated Jo as someone that he confided with and shared the stresses of being an art dealer and talked about Vincent's artwork as it arrived from the south of France and shared Vincent's letters with her. So, unbeknownst to her, she kind of had an informal apprenticeship in what it was like to sell paintings. So, when this first chapter happens, of course, she's shocked and grieving. But when the assumption comes up, hey, you're going to move back to your father's, there is something already within her that can glimpse maybe a different type of life because she had a different experience with Theo than she had had growing up, where he respected her thoughts, treated her as an equal. And so that is, to me, that creates that opportunity for her to shift.
Right. Yeah. Because again, you get that very early in the beginning, kind of how she's thought of in her own family and even sometimes in her own head, but also then how she talks and thinks about Theo and their relationship. And you can see that shift starting to happen even for her, which is
Hmm.
amazing. So when you sit down to write, talk about character development. Do you like to have a really strong idea of people before you start writing? it's a little different for historical fiction, but do you kind of let them evolve as they write? How does that work for you?
I think because Jo is a real person, I was a pantser
Yeah.
for sure. But I did it, as you said, through a character arc. And so then I looked in the events of her life for proof points for how that character arc could happen. And so what I mean by that is she has a moment when she meets a lover. I won't give too much for a spoiler, but that then relationship to me meant a sense of emancipation and a step away from that traditional expectations of how a widow would behave, which is not to have sex outside of marriage,
Right.
type of a thing. And
Right.
so I looked for.
So it's Paris. Come on. I mean, like Paris and or Amsterdam. Let's.
That's right. What am I? I need to get up to speed here.
No,
But
I apologize.
No. You're totally good. So I wanted to see that drive of character development, and so definitely chose and picked events in her life where I could make that arc obvious for the reader,
Yeah.
and give them then that sense of agency in how she was changing.
Yeah, that makes sense. You talked a little bit about research. So obviously you had to research Jo a lot and Vincent and the whole family, but was there any particular research that stood out for you that was maybe unexpected?
I think that I had some sort of punctuation points. So to your point, I did do a lot of reading. I found an out of print book called Brief Happiness, which is the correspondence Theo and Jo had when they were engaged. And they didn't know each other that well. Theo fell head over heels in love instantly. But in that correspondence, there's a nice transition. And they wrote like every day, morning, afternoon, they were in constant correspondence. And that their relationship shifts within those letters from this sort of, oh, I went shopping today and I found a new dress, and, to more vulnerable, intimate questions like Jo asking, what do you look for in a marriage? What do you want in a partner? And that is when Theo plants some seeds for me, because he says things like, I need someone I can share my burdens with. I want to be able to have someone else know the stresses I'm under. And then later in that same volume, there's a few letters when after they're married and Jo's gone on a visit to Amsterdam, and Theo writes, I'm imagining my head on your lap, sharing my day. And so I had this sense very much through that, a reinforcement through that primary research of looking at letters of what that relationship was like.
I've always found letters as a primary source of research pretty fascinating. I read a lot in college as part of my major and minor, and very interesting what people choose to write to each other depending on their relationship. So to see how Jo and Theo's relationship evolved, I would imagine, was a very interesting part of the research process. At least it would have been for me to see them going from maybe sort of formal and unsure to more intimate and sharing details of their day. But we're going to go ahead and take our second break of this episode. When we come back, we'll be switching from the letters between Jo and Theo to the letters that they have collected from Vincent or to Vincent. And there's, I think she said 900. She'll say that at the beginning of the next segment. So you are tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with author Joan Fernandez. Before the break, Joan was talking about research and reading the letters between Jo and Theo. And I'm always impressed when those kinds of letters are not only preserved, but actually make their way into collections where they can be studied by others and used as research. I think that's amazing. I don't even know if, yes, I lived in a time when letter writing was still a thing. Nobody's ever going to save my letters. I didn't save letters. So I think it's amazing that letters did get saved, have been used, etc. But let's go ahead and return to the conversation with Joan.
I also read all of the correspondence that that the Van Gogh Museum has collected around Vincent. So that's 900 letters, the majority of which goes to Theo. And I read those, Sarah, because that's the way Jo got to know Vincent. And the letters became really significant to her because she'd only met him 3 times before he died. And so that sense of who Vincent was as both this combination of philosophical to ornery to funny to sad to struggling. I mean, it's really silly, but I feel like I know Vincent now when I see his paintings, So all of that was really insightful, but I had a couple of punctuation moments. So for example, in 2019, my husband and I traveled to Europe to walk in Vincent's footsteps and also Jo's. And I had all these addresses. And so I was able to find the address where Jo and Theo had lived, and they lived in this apartment up on like the 3rd floor. And outside their window is a plaque in Paris, and it says in French, but it says Theo van Gogh, the brother of Vincent van Gogh, lived here from 1888 to 1890. Nothing about Jo.
Right.
So I thought, oh my gosh, there she is. She's the one that we even care about the Van Gogh name, and there's no reference to her whatsoever. So that's what I mean by sort of these punctuation points of this person that I'm writing about just being erased from history or never written into history. Yeah. And so that just gave me even all the more incentive to get the book written for sure.
Yeah. It doesn't even say Theo van Gogh and his wife lived here. Like so many times women don't have a name, but at least they get sort of mentioned. But wow. Yeah.
So I think, I thought that was really key to me, just to help sort of understand also the times and why it would it would not even occur to have her referenced at all.
Right. Yeah. I was in college, I was a history major with a women's studies minor. So we read a lot of correspondence and a lot of diaries of women. And sometimes I think in this day and age of texts and email and all the ways we communicate, I wonder in 100 years, when people talk about writing about well-known figures, it's going to involve emojis and like, it's going to be so different, but possibly very interesting.
Yes, just a whole different angle, right? But it'll be open to interpretation then.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Is that a sarcastic emoji or is that a emoji?
Right.
Yeah.
Why does this person use LOL at the end of every sentence? But what draws you to writing historical fiction?
Well, in this case, I'm actually in love with the present. And I think that history can inform us a lot about what's going on. And I feel as though history is cyclical. And so it strikes me that we think of so many things as being brand new, and we've been here brand new and never been here before. And yet history has shown us similar circumstances. And so I love this idea of connecting the present with the past by being able to show that, like, people are just resistant to change. It's just hard, things like that. I remember reading this historical account about when trains were first developed, and there was this whole outrage about, oh, look, the physical body cannot handle that type of a speed. It's going to fly apart. Or
Right.
people are going to go crazy and start ripping off their clothes because they can't handle. Or cows, when the trains pass cows, they'll stop giving milk. I mean, it's just all of these processing of this major change of all of a sudden distance is not the same because you can get places faster. So
Yeah.
I think that I don't know that the past necessarily gives us answers for the present, but I think it can give us perspective. And so that's why I love to learn through fiction. And so it felt like a really fun thing for me to attempt to do in my book.
So from that perspective, what do you feel like we in the present can learn from Jo and her life?
Well, I believe that one of the sort of universal things is that we all have, I'm just going to use the word an essence, right? So she had this identity when the book starts of being a daughter, a wife, middle class, expectations that society had around how women behaved. She ultimately shed a lot of those in order to lean into her superpower, which for me was her ability to see ways to open up people's awareness around Vincent. I mean, I can't use the word marketing because it wasn't used in that time.
Right.
And I equate it kind of to, I like to use the analogy of Lucille Ball, who was the great comedian, how she had this sense of comedy that was so simple to her, so clear. And yet studio executives were like, no, 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 honey, that's not how comedy is done, right? So
Yeah.
she had opened up her own studio, launched I Love Lucy, still one of the most successful sitcoms ever, because she
Mhm.
knew she could see it in her thought. And so for Jo, when I think about her essence, she could see ways to begin to build this market for Vincent. And in my book, I give her motive to be in part to ensure that her son has an inheritance because
Mhm.
they have all these paintings, but they're worth nothing.
Right.
But she has a motive that's beyond, let me just make some money to make money. And so I think that this today, as always, we are confronted with messages on how we should be, how we should act, what is right, what is not right. And you can even get bigger backlash today if you disagree with folks. And yet, I think that this idea of reinforcing, well, who am I and what is my unique gift? And I would say like the bumper sticker is to thine own self be true.
Mm.
You, how do you look through the fray and think about who you are and what you bring to the world? And I think Jo demonstrated that. I think
Yeah.
she ultimately shed a lot of the old identity, and she also embraced who she was. One of the themes that I bring up in the book is her dedication to, we would call it social justice today, or social issues. So even in her 20s, she was joining groups that were concerned about how workers were treated, things like that. So we have these threads, these little golden threads within us that tell us who we are and why we're here. And
Yeah.
she was able to start to pay attention to those despite the identities society had given her and she had internalized.
Right.
And I just love that idea. And I, you know, strive to strive myself to sort of figure out where I land on that landscape.
Yeah.
And um, and then from there, answers come to our societal issues. But
Mhm.
I've given Saving Vincent a very big task to do, but I'm hoping that some of those ideas will spark where people will say, to thine own self be true. Am I doing that? How do I feel about that?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a good thing to remember to thine own self be true. I know there are ways that I can incorporate that better into my own way of thinking, and we probably all have areas where we can do better with that. But I am going to show my age now because whenever I hear the phrase to thine own self be true, I think of Shakespeare, but I also think of Gilligan's Island. because there's an episode where they put on a play and it's a musical. And I don't remember much else about that except that I remember all of the words to the song that they sing. And I'm not going to sing it for you, but To Thine Own Self Be True. It's been playing in my head all day as I have, or since speaking to Joan over the weekend, and then, or sorry, this week, and then as I've been thinking about editing and working on this episode, I've been singing a song from a random episode of Gilligan's Island. There you go. There's your possibly your earworm for the day if you know that song. If not, then you don't have to worry about it. But we're going to go ahead and take our next break. When we come back, what readers might learn about Vincent van Gogh in the process of reading this book and learning about Jo. You're tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back. Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with author Joan Fernandez. Before the break, I was talking about Gilligan's Island, but more importantly, Joan was talking about Jo's life and what we in the present can learn from Jo's life and experience in the past. Let's go ahead and return to the conversation with Joan. Obviously, the book isn't about Vincent, but you can't not talk about Vincent van Gogh since the title. But if people know about him, they might not know much beyond he was an artist and he cut off his own ear. I think those are the two things that most people would tell you. But what do you hope readers might learn about not only Jo, but Vincent as well through the book?
Well, I would hope that the book counteracts this assumption that all he was a deranged mind.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's all sorts of theories out there about what his mental health problems were. I think maybe the closest is bipolar.
Yeah.
Because, and the reason that I say that is because in his letters, he would talk to Theo, he would write to Theo about starting to feel dark. And he truly was deranged and delusional when he was out of it. But I think that because of these experiences, he kind of shed all the artifice and was truly trying to paint the essence of what he saw. He used heavy oil impasto, it's called thick oils to show energy and intensity on the canvas. So he was using his talents to attempt to express what he saw in his thoughts. And so I think that perhaps there would be an opportunity for people reading my book to see that he was prolific. Of course, he was just an engine. He just painted all the time, that he was passionate, and that he was not just a crazy guy.
Yeah.
He truly was a genius.
Yeah.
And I believe in the book I have a transition point where Jo goes from trusting that Theo always thought that Vincent was a talent to, after reading his letters, seeing it for herself.
Mm-hmm.
So because I felt like if she was going to dedicate her life, she has to have a motive that's not just because my husband liked it, I'll like it too,
Right.
type of thing.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Favorite Van Gogh piece of art for you?
Well, I'm going to ask you the same question, Sarah. So I'll answer, but mine is almond blossom. It's
Which,
got this cobalt blue sky for listeners. It's got these blossoms that are in white and pink, and Vincent painted it on hearing the news that Joe and Theo had just had a baby son whom
mm,
they named after him. And it was kind of an olive branch in a way because he'd been sort of um, irritable around the idea that Theo was getting married. And I think it was based on fear that maybe Theo couldn't continue to support him financially. And so that was like a nice little, I'm happy for you.
yeah.
What about you?
I love the colors in the sunflowers in those paintings. But I really love his use of color. Like even looking at the cover of the book behind you, it's
Hmm.
um I don't know, it's something somehow both bold and soothing. I don't know if that makes sense, but I always just feel saturated with color in
Yes.
his
And if
painting.
you look really closely, next time you're at an art museum with a Van Gogh, go and stand as close as you can without the guard yelling at you,
Right.
and you'll see that there's actually a lot. It's not like pointillism where it's all just really teeny teeny, but
Right.
there's colors next to each other, and so he was using that technique of our brain doing the blending for us,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
I think that creates some of that sort of vibration for us.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Are you working on anything currently?
I am I'm scanning. I'm waiting for the next idea. I was just at a book launch for a friend who she was launching her fourth book, and she said she just kept looking until something sparked. And Sarah, that's where I am. I started researching another book and I just didn't grab me. And honestly, I feel as though Joe's story is so big, probably spend 90% of my time marketing it. I
Right.
really want to just take advantage of that it was released this year and to help spread the word. So, but I have my mental antenna up for the next idea.
And which you never know when that's going to come. So yeah, you gotta keep an eye out for it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay, so I always knew you wanted to write, but life, of course, is life and happens. What was the final impetus that pushed you to actually, nope, now is the time I actually need to sit down and make this attempt?
You know what happened, Sarah? I was so I had gone on this trip to Amsterdam with girlfriends, and I always make that point because I think respectfully, if I'm with my husband, I'm thinking, is he doing all right? Have we been here long enough? But with girlfriends, it's always like, I'll be in the gift shop. Don't worry about it, right?
Hmm.
So I had this moment that plants a seed about Joe. Um, but then we return to work. We're all full on soccer schedules, full on work, all that sort of a thing. And it's maybe 8 months later, I'm with these same girlfriends at lunch, and we have to be back in the office a certain amount of time. So we just start goofing around because we got
Hmm.
maybe 15 minutes before we have to leave, and we start talking about what's going to be on our tombstone.
Okay.
And so we're saying things like, no more PowerPoints.
Right.
And then we go around and we're making a comment about ourselves. So it gets to me and I said, here lies Joan. She always said she'd write a book and she never did.
Hmm.
And everybody chuckled, but Sarah, I felt like I got kicked in the gut. It was
Yeah.
the oddest thing. And I thought, oh my God, like what if I never write a book? And it's because I told you earlier about being an English major. I had always thought that's what I would be doing. And I remember thinking, well, it's not going to write itself. And I'm in
Hmm.
my 50s. I have a 30-year career. I've invested a lot, right? So that day, before I even go home, I go to a bookstore and I buy every writing magazine I can find. So here in the States, it's Poets and Lovers, it's Writer's Digest, and others. And then I subscribe because I think, okay, if they're arriving in the mailbox, so I start to read these magazines when they come in just to figure out. I mean, I'm clueless on craft, on publishing, on anything, right? So I'm reading and I start to just kind of get familiar. And so then I take some vacation days and I go to this writer's retreat and I am just like I had like rookie stamped on on my on my forehead because I'm just listening to these people. In fact, this one class I went to, it was all, well, actually every class was the instructor gave an idea, then there was time to write, practice it, do some writing, and then there was sharing time. So
Mhm.
um, there would be these classes. The time would come to share, and I'd have my little, pad of paper in front of me with my sharing, and I'd be thinking about sharing. And then a person would speak up, and I'd think, "Oh my God, that's so good,"
Yeah.
And then another person would speak up, and I'd be like, "Oh my God, that's so good." So later on it was just a weekend. I'm at this you go through this buffet line with your tray and then you sit down at picnic tables with different people. And I sit across from another woman who's similar in age to me. And I make a few comments and I ask her, I make a few comments, but then I say, "What's your background?" And she goes, "Well, I had a 30-year degree career in academia." And she goes, "Took me 3 years to clean the academics out of my writing." So I thought,
Mm.
I have corporate speak in my language. I am proficient in corporate speak.
Yep.
So I thought, okay, I need to start working on writing. And so I'm still working full on and with my regular job, but I start taking classes in how to write. And then at one point, I'm in this virtual group with other creatives, musicians, artists, other writers. And Sarah, I like mentally, I'm up on the top of the bleachers, top row, and I'm just listening to the playing field, right? Because
Mhm.
they have a different vocabulary, a different sense, completely different than the financial services field, which is where I worked.
Yes.
And one day, one of those writers, I rarely participated. One of those writers said, "What book do you want to write?" And I shared Joe's story, and she said, "Write that book." And I thought, oh my God, maybe I should write that book. So that was the beginning of my actual, I started to make steps to say, I think I need to leave my job and become an author.
Wow. It's that kind of change the trajectory of our lives. It sounds like that's what Joan had with her friends when she made the comment of what would be on her tombstone, kind of a morbid joke, which we tell all the time, but then somebody says something and it hits you differently than you have thought about before, or just you're in a different place and can hear it differently maybe. What kinds of experiences have you had like that? I would love to hear them. I'm going to think about that over the break. We are going to take our final break of this episode. When we come back, Joan's advice for those who would like to write potentially. You're tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back. Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and the conclusion of my conversation with author Joan Fernandez. I'm laughing because you can see Chalupa peeking through the curtain as though he's like watching me record this right now. Before the break, Joan was talking about what really finally pushed her to sit down and write this book, which segues nicely into what we're going to talk about next, which is her advice. Let's go back to that conversation with Joan. From your experience then, what piece of advice would you give for someone who wants to write?
I would say get the cheapest notebook, spiral notebook you can find, like go to a, you know, drugstore like Walgreens or whatever, get a pen, and whenever a scene or something comes to you, write it down. Just write it. Don't worry about it being smart or wonderful or whatever. Or get an app where you can do dictation and then it will transcribe. Like there's one called Oasis that I use every now and then. In other words, don't wait for the perfect time. Don't wait at all. Don't wait. Just start, because I think that the process of writing, it takes a while. I talked about getting rid of corporate speak. The other thing that took me a while is just being not having imposter syndrome that I should even be doing this. And I think so. Just butt in chair, do it. That would be my recommendation without. And I've given away so many cheap notebooks just to,
Yes.
to eliminate that first step of, well, I couldn't get to the store, you know.
Right, right. Although I love notebooks, I have too many of them just because I, not cheap ones, but I just like, any.
You're a notebook person, yeah.
Yeah, or I don't know if if I'm a dragon, that's what I hoard.
I love it.
Yes. When you take time to read, obviously you've already said you're a reader. So when it's not for research or anything like that, what are your favorite genres and authors?
Well, lately, I mean, for the longest time, I was reading historical fiction because I was just trying to figure out how other people did things. And so I've started to branch out. I would say historical fiction is still my favorite genre, but I read a fantasy recently, Susan Clark Piranesi. So mind-blowing. Um, I have started many different horror books just to sort of figure out how the horror happens. But I have to be honest, I haven't been able to finish one yet. Stephen King, I mean, he's just brilliant. And so I read with a highlighter to see how is he planting those seeds, to see craft wise, how he just makes you scared. And
Yeah.
then the same kind of a flip side, but the same with Kristen Hanna, whom I really enjoy her, and she always makes me cry. And so I highlight what is she telling us in the beginning so that we'll really have a connection and feel for that main character so that it makes us cry
Yeah.
at the end of the book.
Yeah.
So I am trying to read more widely right now, but I would say that I fall back to historical fiction quite a bit.
Yeah. Not a place to fall back. Not a bad place to fall back to.
No.
You're spending time with your grandchildren right now. Do you read with them?
I do when they're patient enough. They tend to be bouncing around a lot and I need to bribe them when I read
Yeah.
to them. So we're still in the beginning of that. But I am patient and I will be persistent.
Yes. What bribe works best right now?
Oh, what bribes? Oh, like pulling a prank on their sibling.
Mm.
Or I do these treasure hunts where neither of them read yet, so it's all with pictures, so they have to go from picture to picture to picture. Um, it's imaginative play like that. It's fun. It's really
Fun.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very fun. Thank you. Um, Website, if people want to know more about you and the book, a website, if you have one, and any social media that you're active on.
Sure. My website is joanfernandezauthor.com. And my Facebook is the same, Joan Fernandez Author. When it comes to Instagram, which I do post on there mostly, I truncate my last name. So it's Joan, Ferndz, Ferns Author. But I would love to have people there. I'm also on LinkedIn because I can't quite shake my corporate identity.
Can take the girl out of the corporate world.
I know. And then I also have a newsletter on Substack called Digging In with Joan Fernandez. And that's a weekly free essay where I'm trying to do what I talked about earlier, connect the present with the past in a way that's hopefully inspires people to reach for their true potential.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Joan, is there anything that we haven't talked about during our time that you want to make sure you highlight or mention?
Gosh, it's perhaps the most important thing, Sarah, is that I am so grateful to know about Jo van Gogh. I love talking about her so that other people know about her too. And it opens the door to so many more stories of people who have not been written into history and how we've got those opportunities in front of us.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And thank you so much for taking time away from playing with the grandchildren to talk to me about Saving Vincent and writing. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. I love this podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you again to Joan for joining me to talk about Saving Vincent. I really enjoyed our conversation and I really enjoyed learning more about Jo van Gogh and the legacy that she created. The legacy of Vincent van Gogh would not be what it is today if it weren't for Jo and her hard work. And just seeing her at the beginning of the book and how she transforms and grows somewhat out of necessity, somewhat out of just sheer determination, but just watching that character arc is really fascinating. So if you're a fan of historical fiction, if you like learning about women who are maybe not as well known in history as they could be, definitely check out Saving Vincent. I mean, even if you're just a fan of Vincent van Gogh and want to know more about how his legacy really came to be in the art world, pick up a copy of Saving Vincent and learn about Jo and everything that she did with the paintings and how what we know about Vincent van Gogh today is really down to her. Thank you again to Joan. Also, Joan, if I ever referred to you as Jo in this episode, I do apologize. In my brain, I kept getting Jo and Joan mixed up. So I do apologize if I ever referred to you as Jo. But not a bad person to be, confused with, right? There are many worse names that I could have called you in this episode, but I do apologize if I made that faux pas. Thank you, as always, to you, the listeners, the viewers, the readers, for joining me. I hope you will join me next time when I will be speaking with author Nick Kolakowski about his book, Where the Bones Lie. We are moving back into the realm of thriller and crime fiction. So I'm looking forward to speaking to Nick about this story and this very interesting so far main character. Looking forward to this conversation. Really like this cover too. I don't know, there's something about it that I like with that cover. At any rate, please join me next time for that conversation with Nick. In the meantime, if you are a fan of this podcast, please do me the honor, the favor, what have you, of liking, following, subscribing on whatever platform you're either listening to or watching the episode on. Again, it helps the algorithm. Again, it is greatly appreciated. Something else that really helps that algorithm is to leave a positive review. If you haven't done so already, and if it's in you to do it, I would be very, very grateful. You have no idea how much the positive reviews really help the algorithm get this podcast out to more readers such as yourselves. Do the same thing for your favorite books. Authors will greatly appreciate it, especially independent authors or authors who aren't as well known. The big famous authors, they don't really need the reviews. People already can find their books. But if you like a book and it's a person that maybe isn't as well known as they could be, leave that review. But I hope that you are... I hope you're having a good week. But also, if you are on social media, you can follow the podcast on Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. Love hearing from you. So come find the podcast on social media. Leave me questions, leave me comments. Happy to answer questions, engage with comments, what have you. But I hope you're having a really great day. I hope you've got something amazing planned for this weekend, even if that amazing thing is a nap, because naps can be absolutely amazing. I had one yesterday and it was the most brilliant thing ever. Hope you're having a great day, but whatever is coming your way this weekend, I hope you also have plenty of time to get yourself lost in a good book. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to